Okay, I see that we're about 2 minutes after the hour, so I think we'll slowly get started here, and I'm sure more people will trickle in. So as usual, this is our Atlantic International Research. Sorry, 1 second here. Apologies, I had my YouTube channel talking to me as well. So yes, we're the Atlantic International Research Center, and this is the Blue Mission Atlantic and Arctic Weekly Hour. And I'm Valerie DeLeader-Kirk, so I'll be facilitating and moderating today. And we're very excited because today we've really got a presentation that is about marine restoration that is very applicable to what the Blue Mission Atlantic and Arctic Lighthouse main objective is, which is about all about marine restoration and citizen engagement. So I'm going to be introducing now Rune Steinfurth, and he is a postdoctoral researcher with expertise in coastal ecology and habitat restoration. His doctoral research focused on testing different marine restoration approaches to enhance environmental conditions and faunal diversity in Danish estuaries. He has experience as a graduate researcher and teaching assistant focusing on marine restoration ecology, including seagrass restoration, and he is at the University of Southern Denmark. So I'm going to pass it over to him, and just as usual, the audience, we ask that you please put your questions in the Q&A box, so it's easier for us to find, because sometimes the chat gets very busy. Okay, over to you, Rune. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Valerie. I'm just going to share my screen and then we'll get to it. All right. Is that all good?
Yes, perfect.
So today I'll be talking about marine restoration, specifically for the case study of Vejle Fjord. This project is called Sund Vejle Fjord, which translated into English means healthy Vejle Fjord. And the project has been running for about 4 years now, since 2020. And the aim of this was to restore degraded ecosystems by combining multiple habitat restoration approaches. So in this case, we used eelgrass restoration, we restored biogenic reefs, and we restored boulder reefs. And what I think is a little bit unique about this project in Denmark, at least, is that we have a very good collaboration with the local municipality. So the idea was that a local municipality, which could reach out to local stakeholders and politicians, combined with researchers from a university with a strong knowledge about habitat restoration, would be a perfect combination for actually carrying out such a project. So this is just a little video of some of the biogenic reefs that we have restored in the system. So I'm going to start off with why habitat restoration is needed in the marine environment. So what we're looking at here is a map of Denmark separated into 109 local water bodies. And what we see is that only 5 of these water bodies actually live up to the EU's Water Framework Directive and are in good ecological condition. So some of the problems that we are facing are caused by eutrophication, climate change, overfishing, and general overexploitation of natural resources. So with focus on Vejle Fjord, which I've mapped here, we see that this water body is in a poor ecological condition. So what we have initiated is actually Denmark's largest marine restoration project in this system. So what we've seen that some of the issues that we've seen with eutrophication is that we have degraded water quality. So more than 100 years ago, eelgrass was, for example, growing down to a depth of 11.5 meters in Vejle Fjord. In that reference condition, a total of 63 square kilometers was available for eelgrass growth. We know that not the full area was covered by eelgrass, obviously, but at least it was available in terms of good enough light conditions that it could grow there. Today, this depth distribution is markedly reduced to 2.4 meters. And this allows only 14 square kilometers of area available where eelgrass can actually grow. So it's heavily reduced. So for a different system, we have actually mapped what consequences does this have in terms of loss of ecosystem services. And here we look at a nutrient sequestration in eelgrass. So this system is Vejle Fjord, where we have seen since the 1960s that the eelgrass coverage has been reduced from about 44% of the system to less than 1.5% today. If we look at how much nitrogen was sequestered in the reference state in 1960s, it adds up to a little more than 800 tons per year, per square kilometers per year. And if we look at the reduction target for this system today, according to the water action plans, they only aim to reduce about 400 tons of nitrogen per year. So the excess nitrogen that we actually have left compared to what eelgrass was historically removing by its ecosystem services, we are only aiming to reduce half of this. So it's urgently needed that we actually also try to restore these systems wherever it's possible to regain the ecosystem services. If we look at the mussel beds, in Vejle Fjord, historically in the 1990s, about 7,000 tons of blue mussels were harvested each year by bottom direction. This type of harvest was obviously unsustainable, and today we're left with only a few mussel beds that are here marked in green on this map, and with a very low coverage of blue mussels. In large areas, we actually have mussel shells left on the seafloor, and these indicate that we have had huge mussel banks or mussel reefs historically, and a lot of these that are left as mussel shells are lost to anoxia, but also predation from mesopredators such as European green crab and common sea stars that are present in huge numbers in Vejle Fjord. So not only have we lost the adult cohorts of the blue mussels, but we also see a very poor recruitment on the bottom substrate. So each year we have a huge settlement of juvenile blue mussels. They're on every substrate, the bottom, on eelgrass leaves, but they only survive on suspended structures, meaning that our hypothesis is that on the benthic substrate that we have these mesopredators that can actually reach them, the sea stars and the green crabs, but as soon as they are suspended in the water column, they are not able to get to them. Simultaneously, the anoxia that we have seen in the system primarily happens along the sea floor. So they actually, if we remove these stressors, they can actually have quite a good recruitment. For the boulder reefs, we've removed, historically in Denmark, we've removed about 52 square kilometers of stones. They have been stone fished for construction of harbors and piers and other construction work. And they've primarily been removed at depth shallower than 10 meters. So this has really impacted our coastal zone, and the option for macroalgae forests to develop on these rocky shore substrates. And these stones have mostly been deployed during the last glaciation, so these will not come back naturally. So we have to assist them in that. At the same time, we have a degraded sediment quality. So all these years of eutrophication has impacted the sediment quality in the system. So what we are left with today is what we can see on this video. It's almost fluid mud. So there's no option to restore either boulder reefs or seagrasses on this type of substrate, simply because eelgrass roots cannot anchor probably in this fluid mud, and the stones would just sink through the mud and be gone. So we definitely have some big challenges here. Then we have the European green crab. These have exploded in number in Denmark, and it's mainly because of trophic cascades. Top predatory fish like the cod have been overfished to an extent now where there's almost none of them left. So the crabs don't really have any natural predators. So they've just exploded in numbers, and in these degraded systems, they are very good at adapting. So what we also see is that Vejle Fjord actually has the highest density of European crabs in all of Denmark. So these are really an issue. So how do we address so many problems at once? We asked ourselves, and this is a conceptual design of what we wanted to do when the project was initiated. So we would try to restore some of the lost eelgrass meadows, and then we would restore biogenic reefs up and downstream of the eelgrass, so that the water would be filtrated and cleared before it reached the eelgrass meadows. The boulder reefs would be used on exposed coastlines to reduce the impact of waves and strong currents, because there's a lot of these coastlines that historically had eelgrass, but now that it's gone, it has a very difficult time to naturally reappear because sediment conditions have been altered, or there's simply just too high a shear stress on this coastline. So maybe these boulder reefs could serve as protective measures against that. We also have initiated a European green crab fishery locally around these restored hotspots to remove some of the negative impact that they have. So let's proceed to why we did it and how we did it. So why do we restore eelgrass meadows? They, as already mentioned, contribute with several positive ecosystem services. They serve as nursery habitat for invertebrates and fish. They are home to high biodiversity. They have high nutrient sequestration, but also carbon sequestration. And they serve as coastal protection by creating a stability of the sediment via their rooting rhizosphere. When we do eelgrass restoration, the most important thing is proper site selection before we initiate it. Otherwise, it will often lead to failures, and the work impact is quite huge. So it's important to put the effort into places where it really makes sense. So we have developed sort of a site selection procedure where we use models coupled with satellite imagery and drone analysis that can look at different stressors and how they would impact eelgrass if it was transplanted at different sites. This gives us some indication of where it's possible to restore eelgrass. The next step is that we actually go into the field and see if there are any obvious stressors that would give problems for our test transplants. Then we proceed to doing small-scale test transplants. Here we only restore very small areas where the work impact is very low. We usually do it on a eutrophication gradient. So we have the highest load of nutrient discharge in the inner part of the fjord, and it's reduced as we get closer to the outer boundary. So by planting them on a gradient, we can actually see when we reach sufficient good water quality that so that restoration of eelgrass is possible. And only once we see positive signs from these test transplantations, and the positive signs is net growth for more than a year, then we move on to planting in large scale, which is currently in hectare size. And lastly, monitoring of the planted eelgrass is obviously very important, but also measuring and quantifying the ecosystem services that we gain, because this is where the true value of the habitats lie. So if we start out by looking at how we restore the eelgrass, we start out by harvesting from natural populations. We usually find, if we have them available, we look for healthy meadows that are more than 100 square meters large, and we always go and harvest in the center of the meadow so that we don't fragment and impact the outer boundary of the meadows. We harvest very small fractions that can close by vegetative growth within the coming growth season. And we have seen that this has no impact on these healthy meadows at all. But at the same time, we can actually gain really a lot of shoots by only harvesting very small areas, so some few square meters. Yeah. Next thing is that we move on to putting them into these floating baskets so that they are kept wet all the time. From here on, we proceed to land, where we also keep them continuously wet, and then we attach them to iron nails. The iron nails are pure iron, so they will corrode over time and not have any negative impact in the system. They're attached with a little bit of iron wire, and this is actually an anchor that really helps them survive the initial 2 weeks to 1 month until they can attach themselves by their roots in the system. So what we see is that there's a much higher survival when we use this anchor. And also that if they are uprooted, let's say green crabs dig a hole right next to the eelgrass and they're uprooted, a shoot without an anchor will float, while these that are attached to nail, they will actually stick to the bottom and allow it to re-anchor in the sediment. So the shoots are not completely lost by having this anchor. After that, we manually by freediving plant these shoots. And we usually use these circular frames to plant them in. We plant 25 shoots in each frame. This is based on that this 1 meter diameter ring can actually grow into one little patch within the first 1 or 2 growth seasons, and create one little self-sustaining meadow. So the process is to take a very dense donor meadow with 500 to 1,000 eelgrass shoots per square meter or more, then put them into these, plant them into these small frames. In each frame, the density is about 33 eelgrass shoots per square meter. But then if we look at seascape scale, we actually spread these out in a pattern as we see to the right. And if we look at it on this scale, we only plant 1.5 to 2 eelgrass shoots per square meter. But they are collected in these little dense bunches so that they are actually have some sort of self-protection for within a year or two. And then the bare areas that we leave in between the little patches can actually be colonized within first within 5 years, but then the large bare patches, they can be colonized within 8 to 10 years. So it's quite some time scale, but it's we are exploring the most efficient way to cover large areas with as little effort as possible. And this is then an example from Vejle Fjord, from how the eelgrass has developed within 3 years. And we see a very, very massive vegetative growth already after 3 years, and not only by the patches that we have transplanted, which is the clearly man-made ones that are squared, but we also see that once we go and restore eelgrass in close proximity to fragmented natural meadows, the natural meadows actually have a positive benefit from this as well, and they increase in areal extent. If we have a little look at some of the first patches that we transplanted, look up at this 2020 2020 patch up here, we actually, in our own opinion, transplanted it a little bit too dense. Because what we can see in the 2023 scenario is that it's already a full and dense meadow. We would actually like to have this 10-year period where it continues to cover more and more area. Because we have put the work effort is based on how many shoots we transplant, and actually not on the total area. So if we can spread the shoots out more sparse and they still survive, that's a very good thing. If we look at the eelgrass restoration potential in general in the fjords, what we see is that the highest potential is in the outer parts of the fjords, where the water quality is best. And these two maps are modeled indicators of suitable areas for eelgrass restoration. And on the left side, we have the current status where there are some options for restoring eelgrass in the innermost part of Vejle Fjord, but they are very sparse. But if we look at a 30% reduction of nutrient, both nitrogen and phosphorus, we actually see that this area vastly increases by about 138 hectares of extra area that is now available for restoration. So this shows us that we cannot stop addressing the problems at the very source, and the very source is still eutrophication in these systems. So we still have to work on reducing the amount of nutrient that these water bodies receive. Next habitat is the blue mussel reefs. And why do we restore these reefs? They also provide a nursery for invertebrates and fish, provide high biodiversity, but also filter the water for phytoplankton, giving better water quality. But also just to recreate these former habitats that we have seen have been removed by bottom trawling and fisheries. So if we look at how it's done, we have the mussels grown on a suspended facility, and then from around May and until fall, they naturally settle down in these suspended facilities where they are protected from predators and anoxia. And then in the fall, they are harvested onto a boat. From this boat, they can be sailed out to different spots. And then they are sort of just washed out on the side of the boat. And they sink to the bottom. So this is actually a quite efficient way to restore very large areas, because the suspended facility that we have in the fjord system provides about 400 tons of blue mussels each year. So we have actually been able to each year restore about 10 to 12 hectares of the blue mussel reefs. So this is by far the habitat where we have been able to restore most in terms of the areal extent. We've looked into if we actually get an improved water clarity by these blue mussels. And what we see is that it's depending on the site where we restore the mussels, we gain an improved water clarity of about 17 to 36%. We can actually see it also just visually from videos like we have on the right side, where we have clear water just above the mussel reefs, and then an increasing turbidity higher in the water column, where we still have unfiltered water with high concentrations of phytoplankton. These mussel reefs also provide high biodiversity, and they have developed differently depending on which location you are in. I've taken 4 different examples here. If we look to the top left, we see one of the mussel reefs that has actually served as a true biogenic reef, giving hard substrate to macroalgae to colonize this area. And the same is on the top right side and the bottom right side. The bottom left side at Bübeck, this is more in the inner part of the system, and we saw that these common sea stars, they started immediately predating on the blue mussels. So we actually restored 2 sites in there, and one was heavily impacted by the sea stars and was completely eaten within 1 to 2 years, while the other one continues to be alive today and function as a very well functioning biogenic reefs. So we also went and measured some biodiversity in these areas. We looked at epifauna at these sites, and the sandy bars show the habitats before we restored blue mussel reefs, and the colored bars show the 2 years after, in 2021 and 2022. And then we have 2 control stations that are purely bare bottom or sand bottom, without any structures at all, neither reefs or eelgrass or anything. And what we saw in terms of species richness is that we have had an improvement on 3 out of 4 sites, and that these were always significantly more species rich than our bare bottom controls. We had a similar strong pattern for the amount of animals, the individuals per square meter, where we saw an improvement in this parameter for all 4 stations, and always higher than the control sites. Next habitat that we looked at was the boulder reefs. So why restore the boulder reefs? They also, like the other habitats, provide high biodiversity. If they are created so that they are caves, the caves provide shelter for cod that are an important predator on the green crabs. So getting some of these caves back in the system could be very beneficial for the species. They were also constructed so that they would provide shelter for eelgrass transplant on exposed coastlines, and they should provide hard surface substrate for macroalgae forests to develop. This is one of the video where we have an example of one of the reconstructed boulder reefs right after it was relaid. And what we tried to do here was to pile them up so that we get these caves all around where the cod can hide them. But we also made some reefs that were evenly dispersed stones, because we have seen from previous studies that these are very beneficial also for macroalgae succession. So how it was done was that the stones were shipped to Vejle Fjord from Sweden on a large barge, and then they were redeployed at 5 different sites in the system with a grab. And what we tried to do was that we looked at restoring these on a eutrophication gradient, just as I mentioned with the eelgrass. so that we tried to restore some stones a little bit further inside the fjord and closer to the mouth fjord. So and what we expected was that there would be a clear signal on the macroalgae succession and colonization. And these results are not quite ready yet, but hopefully we will have them in the coming year. This restoration of boulder reefs was limited in the very innermost part of the fjord because we had the sediment substrate that was fluid mud, so we wouldn't be able to restore any boulder reefs on that type of substrate. So we had to find either gravel or sand as a substrate to restore these reefs. And what we saw even before we got any macroalgae on the reef is that cod and rays, pollock and lobsters, and also sea squirts, they all colonized the reefs very fast, within the first few months actually. But also, which was not at first visible, several small amphipods, copepods, and snails that provide important food, that are important food items for some of the fish, were there in very huge numbers, very fast, within months. We also saw that it was beneficial for some fish that we didn't have a monitoring program set up for this, but this is just a fun video showing that cormorants also very quickly found out that this was a very good habitat to go and forage for fish and go look in all the caves to see if anything was hiding. Lastly, we tried to address this issue with the exploding population of the European green crab. So one of the first things we did was that we tried to estimate how many crabs we actually had in Vejle Fjord, and we estimate that we have more than 4 million crabs in the system, which is a little more than 4 crabs per square meter. And this really shows that we have an imbalanced ecosystems where this one species is dominating due to trophic cascades because of the lack of predators that have simply been overfished historically. They have a detrimental impact on both eelgrass but also blue mussels. They destroy the eelgrass shoots either by cutting and shredding the leaves or burying right next to them so that the shoots are uprooted. But they also predate heavily on the eelgrass seeds, preventing natural recolonization. They also predate on blue mussels, both on the adults but also on the juveniles. And what we have found is that they prefer the smaller individuals. So the predation pressure on the juveniles is very high. And once we reach a size of a little bit more than 3 centimeters, the predation pressure is actually reduced markedly. So this is what we aim at before we go out and restore biogenic reefs. It is to reach a certain size of the blue mussels to negate some of this predation. So they prevent the natural recovery of both eelgrass and blue mussels, and we try to address it by local fisheries. And I've just included this video just to show how many green crabs we actually see just after we've restored a blue mussel reef. And this is much more than the 4 crabs per square meter that I just mentioned, but they're simply attracted by this restored reef immediately. And what we aim at and what we see is that by restoring such huge areas and huge numbers of blue mussel reefs, and that each blue mussel has a certain size, we can actually neglect some of the predation pressure by having this strength and numbers, so that we don't immediately lose the whole blue mussel reef from predation. And as time slows down, or as time passes, it looks like the reefs actually are less interesting to the crabs compared to this video where they are They are just restored, newly restored. So we had this fishery going on for 2 to 3 years, and it was done by local fishermen. They are all amateur fishers, and they did it out of their goodwill, and there was not really any economical incentive for them to do this. But nevertheless, they actually managed to remove 40 tons of green crabs within 2 years. And what we found is that this was probably less than 1% of the population in the system. So we would have to have completely different scales of fishery to actually address this problem, or try to restore the system so that we would have this natural control of the population by reintroduction of the top predators that are the cod. But what we gained from this, even though we didn't have a significant impact on the population, was that we actually gained some knowledge on that the fishery of females, which are the red dots on this graph, that they were caught in much higher numbers in the first few months of spring. So March, April, May each year, there were much more females caught in the nets, and this was because of the way that these crabs were fished. They were fished with stationary fishing gear, so they were dependent on the mobility of the crabs that they were moving around. And what we see is that the females, as soon as they get eggs, as we move into June, July, in the summer, they start to hide away, and they are not caught in nearly the same amount of numbers. So what we found is that we now recommend if we should target the females to reduce the population so that they don't reproduce, we should actually target the fishery in the early spring to remove some of the females. So what have we achieved in the last 4 years? This is a sort of summary page of Vejle Fjord, and we have recreated a total of 8 hectares of boulder reefs. They are here marked in the gray color. Sorry, not the gray color, the red color. The red dots are the boulder reefs. So as you can see, we have 5 of them on a gradient out through the system, and expect the ones in the outer system to perform much better because of better water quality, especially in terms of macroalgae succession. Then we have restored almost 40 hectares of biogenic reefs. These have been restored all the way from the inner part of the fjord and all the way through the fjord. And as I mentioned, this is by far the most efficient measure to restore large areas, because we were able to grow so large numbers on this suspended mussel farm that we have in the fjord. Eelgrass restoration is probably the most labor-intensive task, but we have restored almost 6 hectares at 3 different sites out through the fjord. And by far the largest effort was in the outermost part where the water quality was best. What else have we achieved? Well, this project, apart from restoring habitat, it has gained enormous political attention. So we have actually managed to have the whole Vejle Fjord as a no bottom trawl zone. So that in the future, the biogenic reefs that we restore cannot simply be fished and overfished again. So this is really huge. And simultaneously, we have created protected areas that are protected against all types of fisheries. This is a total of 54 hectares, and it was done at 4 different sites, primarily targeted around our boulder reefs, because they were the ones attracting the most attention from local fishermen to go and try to catch cod or lobster. And what we did was actually that we went to these local fishermen, and they have noticed that in the last 20 or 30 years they were catching less and less. So they have witnessed the degradation of the fjord. So they have actually voluntarily agreed to that we protect these restored habitats, simply by communicating directly to them and explaining to them what they gain from protecting these areas. The most inner one of the stone reefs right here was actually already protected by a no fishing zone, because there was a ongoing protection already in this little inlet. So we didn't have to do extra protection in that area. If we zoom in on the hotspot or area where we have restored the most area, we can see that we actually managed to restore quite extensive areas of eelgrass with this protective barrier of boulder reefs on the outside, and up and downstream biogenic reefs. I think we have very much achieved what we set out to do in our conceptual diagram. And all of these habitats are already very well functioning, provide higher biodiversity than before, and realize some of these important ecosystem services that we know they can provide. And as you can see, the gray box is actually the no fishing zone, and it was quite cleverly designed in a way so that it would also cover the eelgrass areas and not only the boulder reefs and some of the blue mussel reefs as well. So if we return to what I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, how did we achieve this? Well, we had a strong project ownership from the project leaders in the municipality and us at the university as project partners. And we were actually the ones carrying out the research, doing the environmental assessments, but in very strong collaboration with the municipality. And they were able to actually get this political mandate within the municipality to gain local political engagement, so that stakeholders were involved, both neighboring municipalities, local fishermen, Denmark's sports fishermen, local diving clubs, a high school, other municipalities, and volunteer organizations. And it actually proved to be very valuable to have this local engagement and stakeholder engagement. So the local organizations that use the fjord or getting the young involved that are only in high school, that have helped prepare eelgrass shoots, but also transplant them out together with the divers, has actually made a huge change, because we were probably not able to restore such large areas of eelgrass without them. And the local engagement from the fishermen in this effort of removing green crabs, but also supporting that we could get protective zones around the boulder reefs and so on, has been immensely valuable for the project. That's just to mention and remind you all that volunteers really make a difference, and that it's important for the local engagement, definitely when we carry out such large projects. So in conclusion, I think that the most important thing is probably to address the issues that lead to habitat degradation before trying to restore the habitats. So in case of Vejle Fjord, that has been done in terms of that we have had 40 years of nutrient discharge reduction, so that habitat or water quality has now improved so much that we can actually restore eelgrass in some areas. For the blue mussels, we see that the fishery has stopped, and we have also gained this protection against a no bottom trawl zone in all of Vejle Fjord. For the boulder reefs, it was made illegal to do any stone fisheries in Denmark in 2009. So from that point on, it actually started making sense to restore some of these habitats that could not recover naturally. The next step is to find proper solutions to restore the habitats, especially the ones that do not recover naturally, but also to restore them in areas where they can develop successfully and actually realize the important ecosystem services that they can provide. We also have to think about protecting the restored habitats to prevent future habitat degradation. So this has really also been a large part of the project. And lastly, engage local stakeholders and volunteers to make them invested in the project. Also very important. That was actually all for me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rune. That was such a comprehensive and scientifically rigorous project that really has delivered a lot of knowledge and a lot of data. And I just love how it was put together in such a comprehensive way, not only in looking at the different types of zones, the reef zones, the biogenic reefs, the boulder reefs, and so on that you were mentioning, seagrass areas planted, but the location of it all, and also kind of looking at the upstream, so looking at the land, what's happening on land too, and how close maybe are some human activities and maybe farming, agricultural practices, or whatever, maybe too, just all that coming into play. So yes, I'm really so impressed with this project, and I have a couple of questions. And also I wanted to just honor a bit our audience here, which is so diverse. We've got people coming from Bangladesh and Colombia and Brazil and Mexico, and then over in Europe, Ireland, Portugal, and in Norway and Denmark and the US as well. So really a diverse audience. So thank you to our audience for being here with us. We've got a couple of questions that came in, so maybe I'll just jump over and start with those. So Phil Coloraso, I hope I pronounced that right, asks, have you considered seeding approaches for eelgrass restoration?
Yes, we have. And I think in the past, we've worked with seeding approaches, and we've had huge losses simply. So the seeds have either been washed away or predated by green crabs. So we have had huge problems keeping them on site and seen transport or seeded more than 20,000 seeds and only got four little seedlings the coming years. So a huge effort put into that, and for some time that has then been put away and substituted by transplanting adult plants, because we have had great success doing that. I think in the future we will return to seeding. We are now trying to get an extension of this project, and we will include seeding trials, and that just simply because it has so much potential for scaling up. So we will try to, like many others are already doing, trying to address some of the issues that we can face when we are trying to use seeds. Yeah, I hope that was.
What I hear there too is that seeding, would you say, might be a good solution in other areas that don't have such threats or maybe conditions that aren't suitable?
Yeah, I do believe so, because you can really scale it up. And I think if we look at that the physical, like the wave induced but also the current induced problems that we see where seeds are simply uprooted and they're either transported to deep waters where they don't have sufficient sunlight, or they are washed ashore. Some of those issues, but if we find very sheltered locations, we can maybe overcome some of these problems. But I know that there are also people working with the Hessian bags and so on that assure that the seeds can be kept on location and not transported elsewhere. So I think for the future we will definitely look into that, but also trying to quantify specifically which areas will be suited for seed restoration and in which ones we should use adult shoots. Yeah, so that we get a good outline of what methods to use for what type of areas. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. So next question is from an anonymous attendee. Can you elaborate on engaging with local authorities for permissions, licenses to undertake this work?
Yeah, I can try to do that. So what we have found is that by having the municipality collaborate with us, then the authorities that, for example, give the permission to restore boulder reefs or actually also restore eelgrass, we need a permission from the coastal authorities to do both. It's definitely beneficial that those applications are sent directly from the municipality and local authorities, and that they are just let's just call it, they're just signed by us as researchers, but that it shows that it's really the local authorities that are trying to change things. It definitely helps, and I think we've been able in Denmark to also push an agenda with how important marine restoration is, so that, for example, the time it takes for your application to be processed by the authorities is actually also much faster today. So.
Good point. And out of curiosity, because you mentioned you did the modeling of the analysis there on looking at the gradient and all that, which one has to come first? Do you first have to reach out to the municipalities to see if you can even go into these zones to do this testing to see if they would be suitable locations? Or do you just do the modeling first and then go to the municipality and say, oh, we found these ideal places. Would you be willing to give us permissions?
I think it's definitely, I think it's definitely useful to have the model ready first, so that you have specific locations that you want to go and look at, so that you can then apply for those specific sites, because they won't give you permission to just there's a limit to how large an area they will give you permission to apply for, simply because once we get the permission, that area is reserved for marine restoration in their book on their side. So they won't just let you apply for, let's say, I don't know, I'm just saying a number, 1 square kilometer area and say and do marine restoration in that area. So having specific areas before you proceed is a good thing, I would definitely say. Yeah.
Great. That's really useful to know. So I think, yeah, so what I heard is definitely go out there, test, identify the key areas that would be most suitable for doing restoration work, and then reach out to the authorities and ask for the next steps, going and getting the permissions and establishing a safe or protected zone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Fantastic. Okay, so another question from Phil again here. Have you done anything to improve / change the sediment conditions to support eelgrass restoration? For example, capping the organic rich sediments with cleaner material or dredging out the organic muck and replacing it with cleaner sediments?
We haven't done it in Vejle Fjord simply because we actually found some suitable areas for eelgrass restoration. We might do it in the future, but we have done it in a different system. I had it in my presentation. It's called Vejle Fjord, and we have capped two areas there. One was 1 hectare, and the other one was 1.4 hectare. And we capped it with a 10 centimeter layer of sand. And we could actually see that the eelgrass transplant performed much better on this capped sediment compared to neighboring muddy sediment. But the unfortunate thing in this system was that the water quality was still so poor that the eelgrass transplant died after 6 months. But with when we transplanted in mud, it was dead after just 1 month. So we could definitely see some benefits to capping. In terms of dredging it away, it's simply too large volumes. So to kind of give a picture of how much of this muddy sediment we have in Vejle Fjord, then when they created the suspended blue mussel farm, they had to put anchors in the sediment to hold it in place, and they had to go 15 meters down through the mud before they reached a substrate that was suitable for an anchor to attach. So dredging such large volumes would simply be impossible almost. So that has not been considered.
Thank you. That actually reminds me, I kind of had to laugh when I saw that you were using nails. I'd never heard that before. And I'm kind of curious as to why you landed on a nail. What were the properties that were so beneficial compared to other substrate matter to attach the eelgrass to, like a rock or something?
Yeah, I think the nails were, first of all, they if you pick pure iron, they'll corrode, but also they were quite cheap actually, and it was just something that was already being manufactured, and you could get it for almost no price at all. Get 100,000 nails, for example, and if you were to go out and collect stones, for example, and attach them to that, the workload would be huge for doing that. I think at the same time we didn't want to use rocks because we would, if we were to restore, let's say, 100,000 eelgrass shoots, we would certainly begin to almost alter the sediment conditions and have some type of gravelly substrate. And what we see is usually that the eelgrass has a much harder time dealing in that type, growing in that type of substrate. So what we have also used is actually bamboo sticks, so wooden sticks that we have sort of bent into a V shape, and then this can be used to fasten the rhizome in the sediment. And this has worked very good as well in some areas, but in other areas where we have a lot of green crabs, the green crabs are sort of attracted to this bamboo. I don't know if they can smell it or what they can, but they actually go and pull it out of the sediment. And then you have the eelgrass shoot, which is positively buoyant, and it just floats away and is gone. So yeah, for some systems, the nails are just really good. Also because they have some weight, but it could be any type of iron. It wouldn't have to be a nail. A nail was just cheap.
Yeah, fantastic. Great. Thanks for sharing that extra tidbit of knowledge too about the bamboo shoots. And they might work somewhere else, but not in Denmark. It sounds like those European green crabs love them. Okay, moving on to another question here. So from Enrique, I'm not sure if he says he's not sure if he missed this part of your talk, but where did you get the mussels for the restored biogenic reefs from?
So the mussels for the biogenic reefs are grown locally. So it's this suspended mussel farm is actually just a special some sort of rope that is put out there, and then the larvae they will attach themselves to the ropes and grow into mussels by themselves. So they actually grow very fast when they're in such a suspended mussel farm, especially when they are like we did when we put it in the inner part of the fjord, because we have so high concentrations of phytoplankton, so they are rarely limited by food. So within this half year, from around May to October, they can grow up to a size of 3 centimeters, and they are ready to be harvested and deployed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to honor people's time. So anybody that needs to drop off, please do. I know we're a little past the hour. I still have a question or two that I'm intrigued to get your response from, Rune. But yeah, so I know that you can stay a little longer. So if that's okay, we'll just stay on a bit, 5, maybe 10 minutes longer. And please, if there are any further questions, do send them in. So I was curious about how this project kind of came about in the first place. I mean, what were the steps that you had to take as a university? You know, how did you find the funding for this? Because I imagine this is not a cheap project to do at all.
No.
So how, you know, looking at our audience, people coming from all over the world, what kind of advice would you give them on how to get started with this, how to create a kind of project like this? What kind of partnerships do you need? How much funding do you require for a very holistic project like this? Yeah, to help guide people.
Yeah. So I'll start by saying that before the project even began, there was already local engagement, actually. So, for example, these local fishermen, they started having a miniature blue mussel suspended facility to test out some of these things in very small scale in the system, and they also tried from their little dinghies to put some stones out. And then when we started the project, we at the University of Southern Denmark had our primary expertise in eelgrass restoration. So I think that it actually started as a locally supported initiative between the municipality and local stakeholders. And then they reached out also to us to make good use of our expertise in terms of restoring seagrass. And then, yeah, then an application was made to a private foundation, and we are quite lucky in Denmark at the moment because there's a very good movement at the moment for marine restoration initiatives. So there are several foundations that go in and support large projects. So in our case, it was the Vejle Foundation, and the project size was in total. I have to do it in euros. 3.5 million euros, I think, and this was also co-financed by Vejle municipality. So having a municipality that is willing to put money into restoring the marine environment, and also having employees that are very engaged and I would say that we don't see that with all municipalities, but having those in a combination, and then applying for this money and having a little bit of pilot studies already done locally before the project was initiated, I think that has really helped the process, and I think they just saw it as innovative to actually combine multiple marine restoration approaches like we did here. So yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. So there was already an initiative started, And what I'm hearing, it's like a public and private partnership as well was kind of established with the Velux Foundation. And I'm also
Yeah,
thinking that this is a good example of a nature-based solution project as well, because there's a value chain there. There's production, like with the crabs, for example, harvesting.
definitely.
That's just one example. But in the future, as more and more species come back, and like you were saying, maybe reintroducing the cod, then there's even more opportunities for markets.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, fantastic. And so just maybe my last question, but even though I have more, the fishers, because you talked about how important it is to engage with them. So I'm curious as to how that process happened, what was done, and also um, when they started seeing the results, the changes happening in the ecosystem, and on the seafloor bottom, um, what was their response to? Are they eager to continue to be of more support in the future? And are you already looking then at a second phase of this kind of project?
Yeah, yeah, good question. So I think in terms of engaging with the local fishermen, I think it was actually important that they have a little harbor down to the fjord, and we actually ended up having our boat in that harbor and coming there regularly, both us but also the people employed in the municipality, so that we could have a day-to-day talk and update on what's going on in the fjord, what changes do we see. And this actually opened up for a whole different type of collaboration than if you, let's say, you invite the fishermen to come into the university and you give a very scientific presentation, and they feel that it's very much away from what they can relate to. Then you actually coming there, going out on the fjord and um, doing work and talking to them and showing them the changes that can be made, that has definitely made the relationship with the fishermen very good. Because what I hear sometimes is that there can be a very hostile relationship between biologists and fishermen, because they just think that we after them all the time and saying that they're overfishing and so on. So I think that definitely creating a more that you see eye to eye relationship with them, that helps. Yeah,
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point that we have to understand that fishers, this is a living for them, and they need, they have to go out to sea. So coming to us in terms of a scientist or a government official is not that easy for them to displace themselves. So
yeah,
I think it's incumbent upon us to kind of go out and meet them in their natural environment, if you will, too, and speak to them, yeah, face to face, people as people, one person to one person, and speak their language. And yeah, so thanks for bringing all of that up. This is fantastic. I think I'll probably stop there, but what I would love to know is if you have already some research papers you've written about your findings and your results already published, and if so, then we can link that into the event there that we'll put online. So it's on YouTube, but then all of the information can be included there, maybe links to your papers.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah,
I'll definitely share that. There are some still coming up, but we have written a book chapter which looks very much at the eelgrass restoration part, and I can definitely share that. Yeah.
wonderful. Well, thank you very much. This has been fantastic. I don't know if there's any last words that you want to say or share. Uh, no.
No, thank you very much for listening. It's a
Yes.
great initiative. Great to be able to share some of our findings. Yeah.
Yes. We're really excited to have this on our weekly hour and to share it with the Atlantic and the Arctic community and beyond. Obviously, as you can see, we've got other seas here visiting us today. So No, thank you. And we will stay in touch because we are the Blue Mission Atlantic and Arctic Lighthouse, and we do have plans to do a seagrass restoration workshop involving municipalities and local authorities in Europe. So I'm sure I will be reaching out to you again, Rune. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here and for your questions. Bye for now.